All right, so it turns out that today's notes are even more important because I got a whole bunch of people leaving in here in a few moments when they make the announcement, and that's fine. You're going to have to watch these notes on your own. We will not have time to go back and redo this. Today, we're going to start with the desert, still a terrestrial biome. Why is the desert considered terrestrial? Julius? Because it is land. It is land. To live in the desert, this is not a surprise to anybody. You have to be adapted to live in the very dry and hot climate, and therefore there aren't a lot. There's not a diverse amount of animals and plants that live there because it is a very tough biome to live in because of all of the heat and the lack of water. And let's be honest, sand is not the greatest soil because we have sandy soil back there, and there aren't many plants growing in that. It's too dense. And the way the water sits on the top of it, and especially in the desert, it's going to evaporate before it even has a chance to get into the soil. It's just it's not very conducive for things to grow very quickly. Lots of different deserts. The Atacama Desert in Chile is pretty crazy. Not a lot of rain goes along there. There are some cold deserts. We're not going to get into those. So Carson, for us, we're really going to focus on the hot deserts with sandy soil and kind of go through those as our notes. The seasons in the hot and dry deserts are usually hot during the summer and warm during the rest of the year. And it can get cool in some of the deserts at night, but there's not a lot of rain. Rain is light, it's very short, and most of the time, because the desert is so hot, even when the rainstorms do move through, the water that hits the sand is going to evaporate before it has a chance to seep into the soil. Therefore, that's why plants have to really be able to retain the water that they are able to get. The Atacama Desert that I mentioned gets 1 millimeter. Be sure to look at a ruler later today. 1 millimeter of rain every 5 to 20 years. That's it. That's all the rain they get. And remember that don't worry about that. The temperate rainforest got 12 inches of rain in fog alone. So you have to be adapted to little to no rain when you live in the desert. Desert plants. Desert plants have adapted. They have a few things that they do. We'll talk about the cactus mostly. Number one, they store water. Number two, they have this waxy coating on the outside. And some of us in here, and I say some of us because I've been inside after we come in from recess, some of us put a waxy coating under our arms when we go outside, called deodorant, right? It stops us from sweating. So again, I think before the interruption, we're talking about the cactus and their quote-unquote deodorant. Plants sweat. We're going to talk about that very, very soon. They go through something called transpiration. They let water out when they get hot. Cactus, it's not really deodorant. It doesn't stop the cactus from stinking, but it does stop the cactus from letting out a lot of water. And there's a very similar surface on the needles of those evergreens, those conifers that we talked about. They have an almost waxy coating on the outside of them that stops them from releasing so much water because they need to retain their water. So again, something very, very important. Cactus roots are very shallow. They are almost at the surface. So when it does rain, they don't have to worry about seeping super deep like a tree's roots. The roots are kind of like right there, ready to take up any water that they can so that they can store that for later on. Animal adaptations. I'm really looking forward to seeing this fennec fox when we get to the zoo. It's there. Most of the time it's sleeping. Most of the time it's kind of hidden in the back. But if you're quiet when we go through the desert and you look very closely, you might see this. This thing is kind of wild because it goes long periods, Emery, without drinking any water because it lives in the desert. Hopefully your brain is going, how is an animal living, especially the person back there drinking water, how is an animal living without drinking water? That doesn't make sense. You've told us water is important. It gets most of its water in the juices of the bugs that it eats. I know that's gross, but that's how it survives. It's an adaptation. And those ears are an adaptation. What do you think those ears are for? To hear the bugs, so it can find the bugs and eat them. Again, very small animals, nothing massive going on there for the most part. But again, You got to find out places to live, and you got to be able to survive the high heat. So you're probably nocturnal. What does nocturnal mean? Nocturnal animals. They only come out at night because it's not as hot at night, right? Most of your snakes, nocturnal. That's why it's dangerous to walk around the desert at night without any lights on. You got to be very careful. All right, this video is unavailable. I guess I'll have to figure that out later on. All right, let's get our notes. I'm going to pause. All right, doing our notes on the deciduous forest. All right, deciduous forest. While you're taking notes from the board, I'm going to go back through this for the folks that are in Grizzlies and or at home. Deciduous forest. We live in deciduous forest. We have 4 very specific seasons: spring, summer, winter, and fall in the deciduous forest. And the big, yes, the animals have to adapt to that, but the trees are the big things. The trees adapt to this by changing the color of their leaves, and the leaves fall off in the fall, and then the tree kind of goes dormant. It goes to sleep. It almost hibernates throughout the winter because there's not a lot of sunlight for photosynthesis, and it's not very intense. The days are short, the nights are long, and there's not as much rain in the wintertime. And the trees are storing water. If you have leaves, they can transpirate and lose water. So there's another reason why they lose their leaves. The deciduous forest, you don't have to memorize oak, maple, and birch. They're just kinds of trees that we have here. Do we have some evergreens and conifers here? Yes, we do have conifers here, but the majority of the trees that we see around here are these deciduous trees. Again, if we were drawing the picture of the deciduous forest, most people are going to draw the deciduous forest in the fall. That's just what you think of, is those beautiful oranges and reds and yellows that we get to see this time of year. The reason why, the chlorophyll is leaving the leaves, the thing that helps them do photosynthesis. You're seeing the true color of the leaf at that point. And then those leaves are, if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing by making food, they're going to fall off. They die and fall off, and then the tree is able to rest throughout the winter. But again, you got to know the 4 seasons is the big thing. You can't find it all over the world. The big thing you need to know is we live in the deciduous forest. I don't live in a desert. I don't live in a tropical rainforest. I don't live anywhere else that we've studied, the tundra or the taiga. I live in a deciduous forest because our trees go through those changes during the 4 seasons. And we get to experience 4 seasons, sort of. Again, spring, summer, winter, and fall. Not hot, not cold. Depends on what season it is. Not dry like a desert, not 400 inches of rain like a rainforest. We're like right there in the middle. I would argue that I feel like North Carolina could be considered a temperate deciduous rainforest. I think we get a little bit more rain than that, but that's okay. We could talk about that later on. Deciduous forest is where we live. Trees in the deciduous forest have that adaptation. How many times have we said that? Like 100. If you don't know that that's going to be on the test, that's the big thing. The trees, they have a very special adaptation that helps them survive throughout the colder seasons. And then they grow back in the spring when the sun starts to become more intense and the days are longer, and they can go through photosynthesis and survive. And they get the water that they need to go through that to make those sugars that we talked about during photosynthesis. Animals. Again, bear and deer and squirrels, they all have very special adaptations, and they are adapted to survive those 4 seasons. Some of the birds that live here, they leave during the wintertime. They migrate. Some of the animals, like bears, they will hibernate and sleep through the winter when there is it's too cold or it's not a lot of food sources out there for them. They will rest through the winter. And then I will throw this back up there for the folks at home so they can pause this and get their notes.